There is a particular kind of violation that doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't kick in a door or raise a fist. It moves quietly, through group texts and cheerful phone calls, and the breezy assumption that what belongs to you is, really, available to anyone who needs it badly enough. Mara Calloway had worked for 11 years to get to the point where she could own something. Not rent it, not borrow it, not be permitted to use it, own it. The lake house on the western edge of Cedar Falls, Wisconsin, 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a private dock extending 62 feet into the water, had been purchased with $287,000 of her own money, earned through a decade of 70-hour work weeks, skipped vacations, and enough deferred joy to fill a warehouse. The property had closed on a Tuesday in October. Mara had driven up alone that weekend, sat on the dock in the cold, and allowed herself the single, quiet thought that she'd built something that could not be taken from her. She was wrong. Not about the deed, not about the title, but about the people in her life who had spent years treating the word mine as though it were merely a suggestion. Before we go any further, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city in the comments. And tell me, have you ever had to get even with someone? I want to know. Mara Calloway was 37 years old when this story begins in earnest, though its roots stretch back far longer than that. She was the second of 3 children born to Dennis and Patricia Calloway of Naperville, Illinois, a couple who had raised their family on a philosophy of collective sacrifice that was, on closer inspection, never distributed equally. Dennis worked in commercial insurance. Patricia managed the household and, increasingly, the relationships within it, stitching the extended family together with phone calls and casseroles and an absolute iron certainty that family came first, which in practice meant that Mara came third, after her older brother Tyler, and whatever crisis happened to be unfolding in any given month. Tyler was 41, unemployed in any meaningful sense for most of the past decade, and possessed of a talent for framing his failures as temporary circumstances that warranted sympathy and financial assistance. He had a Dana and 2 daughters, Becca and Kylie, aged 9 and 12, and the entire family unit had developed an efficient system for converting other people's resources into their own comfort. Mara's younger sister Cassie was 34, warmer than Tyler but similarly untethered to the concept of reciprocity. Cassie had 3 kids, a part-time job at a yoga studio, and a husband named Ron, who said things like good vibes only, and had never in Mara's memory offered to split a check. The lake house purchase had been public knowledge within the family almost immediately. Mara had made the mistake of mentioning it on a Sunday call with her mother, and by Monday morning she had received texts from Tyler, Cassie, Ron, and 2 cousins, the Halper side, Marcus, and his wife Janet, all expressing some variation of how exciting and how they absolutely had to come see. Mara had said, "Of course, let's plan something." She had meant it in the way people mean it when they haven't yet fully understood what they've invited. The summer after the purchase, she hosted 2 family weekends, the first in June, Tyler, Dana, and the girls, the second in July, Cassie, Ron, and their kids. Both times she stocked the house with groceries at her own expense, provided linens and towels, cooked most of the meals, and spent Sunday of each visit quietly cleaning while her guests packed and left. No one offered to contribute. No one asked what they could bring. Tyler had broken one of the Adirondack chairs on the dock by standing on it to take a photo, and had sent a laughing emoji when Mara mentioned it. Needed replacing. She replaced it herself, $340. That fall and winter, the calls became more frequent. Had Mara thought about opening the lake house up on a more regular basis? Patricia had been mentioning to people how wonderful it was. Dennis thought it would be nice for the whole family to have somewhere to go. Mara listened to these suggestions with the particular patience of someone who is being slowly walked toward a cliff and can feel the ground changing underfoot but cannot yet see the edge. She had said more than once that the house was hers, that she was happy to host when she could plan for it, that she needed advance notice. Everyone had agreed, everyone had nodded, and nothing had changed. The message that changed everything arrived on a Wednesday evening in late March. It came from her mother, a cheerful, multi-paragraph text. Patricia had been thinking, she wrote, about how lovely it would be to give the whole family a proper spring getaway. The lake house would be perfect, the weather would just be turning, the kids would love the dock, and it would give everyone a chance to really connect. She had already mentioned it to Tyler and Dana, and to Cassie and Ron, and to Marcus and Janet Halper, and to Patricia's sister Diane and Diane's husband Greg, and everyone was so excited. Patricia had tentatively set it for the last weekend of April, Friday through Sunday. That was 9 adults and 4 children, 13 people total, using a house with 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms that Mara herself had plans for that exact weekend. There was no question in the text. There was an assumption so complete that it had consumed the space where a question would have been. Patricia had not asked if this was acceptable. She had informed Mara of the schedule, expressed delight at the plan, and closed with, "I knew you'd be fine with it, sweetheart. You're always so generous." Mara read the text twice. Then she set her phone face down on her kitchen counter and stood there for a long moment, looking at nothing. She had plans for that weekend. She had arranged to go up to Cedar Falls with her friend and colleague Nadia Osi, who had been through a brutal divorce the previous year and needed peace and quiet and someone who wouldn't ask her how she was doing every 40. 5 minutes, Mara had blocked the calendar. She had already bought groceries in her head. She typed and deleted 4 responses. Then she called her mother. Patricia answered on the second ring, warm and expectant. Mara asked, as calmly as she could, when the plan had been made, and whether her mother had considered that Mara already had arrangements for that weekend. Patricia said she had assumed Mara was flexible. Patricia said the family was so looking forward to it. Patricia said it was just a few days, and wasn't that what the house was for, bringing the family together, Patricia said, in a tone so light it barely registered as the blade it was. You have it to yourself all the time, Mara. It's not like we're asking for much. 13 people, Mara's house, Mara's furniture, linens, dishes, appliances, dock, Mara's property taxes, which ran $7,400 annually, Mara's mortgage, which she serviced alone at $1,640 a month. Not one member of the group had offered to contribute a dollar. Not one had asked if she needed anything brought. Not one had, at any point in this planning process that apparently had involved multiple phone calls and a finalized guest list, thought to call Mara first. Mara said she needed to think about it. Patricia said, with a small and wounded note, that she hoped Mara wouldn't make things difficult. Mara said goodnight and ended the call. She sat at her kitchen table for 2 hours that night. She wrote a list. Then she wrote another list. The first list was everything she felt. The second list was everything she intended to do about it. When she reached the bottom of the second list, she wasn't angry anymore. She was something colder than that. After what Patricia did to Mara, on a scale of 1 to 10, how angry are you right now? Drop your number in the comments, because it's about to get a whole lot more satisfying. There is a moment in certain people, after a certain kind of wrong, when the part of them that absorbs and accommodates and finds the generous interpretation finally closes up. Not with a slam, not with violence, just a quiet, deliberate click, like a lock engaging. Mara Calloway reached that moment at approximately 10:30 on a Wednesday night in her kitchen in Chicago. She had been the flexible one for 11 years. She had covered Tyler's rent for 6 months in 2018 when he'd had a cash flow issue. She had lent Cassie $200 in 2020. A loan whose existence had apparently become so uncomfortable for Cassie that she had simply stopped mentioning. She had sent birthday money to nieces and nephews on time every year, never receiving so much as a thank you text from the parents. She had been the one who drove 2 hours to help her parents move their furniture when they downsized their house, while Tyler sent a text saying he couldn't make it. None of this had been offered as evidence for anything. It had simply been absorbed. as Mara absorbed most things, as the price of keeping the peace in a family that had never really asked her what peace cost her. But this was different. This was her house. This was her asset. This was something she had built not with the family's help, but without it, in spite of missed holidays she'd worked through, in spite of the $200 she'd never seen again, in spite of every single time she had made herself smaller so that everyone else could be comfortable. She was not going to make herself smaller this time. She was instead going to document everything. And then she was going to give her family exactly what they deserved. Mara just crossed a line in her own mind. No going back. Have you ever had that moment where you stopped being the bigger person and started planning? Tell me about it in the comments. The first thing Mara did the very next morning was open a new folder on her laptop. She titled it, with no drama, Cedar Falls Family Matter. Inside it, she created 4 subfolders: communications, financial records, property documentation, and reference. Then she began to work backward. She went through 2 years of her phone's message history and screenshotted every relevant exchange. Tyler asking to use the house in June with no mention of contributing anything, Cassie's request in July. Both replies in which Mara had confirmed she would handle the groceries. The texts after the visits in which she had mentioned the chair and been met with a laughing emoji. And now Patricia's Wednesday message. Photographed and dated and time-stamped. She pulled her bank records and compiled a precise accounting of what each family visit had cost her. The June visit, $312 in groceries, $47 in propane for the grill, $304 for the replacement Adirondack chair, $85 to hire a local teenager to mow the property after Tyler's family left it with trash scattered across the lawn. The July visit, $288 in groceries, $110 in additional cleaning supplies and fresh linens, $64 for a broken window latch that Cassie's son had forced and cracked. Total direct costs to Mara for 2 unsolicited family visits in a single summer, $1,246. That number did not include her time, her fuel, her labor, or the weekend of her own lives spent hosting people who had not thanked her. She also did the math she had never done out loud. The lake house carried a $1,640 monthly mortgage, a $7,400 annual property tax, $1,800 in annual insurance, an average of $2,400 in maintenance and utilities over the year. Ownership cost Mara approximately $27,000 annually. Not once had any family member offered a dollar. Not once had anyone asked. In 2 years of ownership, the family had treated the house as a free amenity, a perk that Mara quietly sustained while they arrived, used it, and left. She was not going to stop hosting family. That was not the plan. The plan was to make the arrangement visible, to give it structure, to make explicit what had been silently expected. Because the thing about silent expectations is that they tend to dissolve the moment they're named. The following Saturday morning, Mara drove to Cedar Falls alone. She walked the property carefully, taking photos and notes. She documented the current condition of every room, every appliance, every piece of furniture. She photographed the dock, the lawn, the kitchen, the bathrooms. She noted the serial numbers on the refrigerator, the washer-dryer, the outdoor grill. She assessed the property's rental market value, which she had already partially researched, but now confirmed through 2 property management websites that listed comparable Cedar Falls lakefront rentals. A 4-bedroom lakefront property in the area for late April weekend rented for between $650 and $850 per night. For a 3-night rental and 52 a dizing, $550. She wrote that number down and underlined it. Back in Chicago, she spent a Sunday afternoon writing a document. She titled it formally, Cedar Falls Property, Family Use Policy and Cost Sharing Agreement. She had never written a legal contract. She was a project manager at a mid-sized logistics company. Not a lawyer, but she had spent her career writing precise documents that governed expectations between parties, and she understood the value of clarity. She was not trying to create a legal instrument. She was trying to hold up a mirror. The document was 3 pages. It opened with a straightforward statement. The property at 1148 Lakeview Road, Cedar Falls, Wisconsin, was privately owned by Mara Christine Calloway and available for family use subject to prior arrangement, written confirmation, and shared cost contribution. It specified the house's carrying costs: mortgage, tax, insurance, maintenance, annualized to a monthly figure. It specified a per-visit contribution structure. Family groups using the property for a weekend would contribute $200 per couple or $100 per individual adult toward shared costs, payable in advance by Venmo or bank transfer. It specified a cancellation policy, 21 days notice for any planned visit. It specified a damage protocol. Any breakage or damage would be assessed and billed to the visiting party at replacement cost. It specified a cleaning expectation. The property must be returned in the condition in which it was received, or a $150 cleaning fee would apply. None of these figures were punitive. The $200 per couple was not even close to a market rate. It was the minimum amount that would make the arrangement visible as an arrangement, that would make the cost of casual, unplanned, assumed free usage legible to people who had never once considered it. She read the document 4 times. She changed nothing. Then she wrote the email. The email went to her mother, her father, Tyler, Cassie, and because Patricia had already invited them, Marcus Halper and Aunt Diane. The subject line was Cedar Falls, April weekend and going forward. She opened warmly. She said she was glad the family was excited about the lake house and that she genuinely loved hosting people there. She said she had been thinking carefully about how to make the lake house work well for everyone long term, and that she had put together a simple framework to make sure it stayed sustainable. She attached the 3-page document. She said she would need a response from each attending couple or individual by April 10th, 2 weeks before the proposed visit, including confirmation of availability, signed acknowledgement of the use policy, and payment of the applicable contribution. She noted, clearly and without apology, that she had a prior commitment for part of that weekend and would not be present for the first night, and that accordingly she would need to be confident the house was being used responsibly before she handed over a key. She also said, in the final paragraph, that she wanted to be transparent. The house had not been available for the last weekend of April, as she had existing plans, and she would have appreciated being consulted before the date was communicated to others. She said this without anger. She said it like a person stating a fact. She hit send at 9:14 on a Tuesday morning. The responses started arriving at 9:47. Mara is building something here. Do you see where this is going? Drop your prediction in the comments before the plan unfolds. The first response was from Tyler. It was 4 lines long and contained the phrase kind of cold. He said the family didn't charge each other for things. He said Mara was making a big deal out of nothing. He said, and this was the line that Mara read 3 times, that he had been really looking forward to taking a break. And it would be a shame if she made this weird. The second response was from Cassie, who was longer and more emotional. Cassie said she understood that Mara worked hard, but that this felt like Mara was putting a price tag on family time. Cassie said the kids would be so disappointed. Cassie said, in the 3rd paragraph, that she didn't think Mom had meant anything bad by planning it. She was just trying to do something nice for everyone. Patricia called at 11:30. The call lasted 22 minutes. Patricia was not shouting. She never shouted. But her voice had that particular controlled quality that functioned as a more sophisticated form of pressure. She said Mara had embarrassed her by sending that document to Diane and Marcus before even talking to her about it. She said that a cost-sharing agreement for a family event was hurtful and transactional. She said the house was a blessing and blessings were meant to be shared. Mara listened to all of it. She did not become loud. She said, with measured steadiness, that she had seed Diane and Marcus because they were on the proposed guest list, and it affected them too. She said the house was a blessing she had purchased with her own money and paid for every month. She said she was not asking for anything beyond what a reasonable person would understand was fair. She said she was happy to discuss it further if her mother could tell her, specifically, why it was unreasonable to ask 13 guests to contribute $200 per couple for a 3-night stay at a property with a $7,400 annual tax bill. Patricia didn't have an answer for that. She said Mara was being difficult. She said she didn't understand why Mara always had to be like this. Mara asked what like this meant. Patricia said she had to go and would call back later. She didn't call back that day. What happened instead was a group text, the family group, which Mara was a member of, in which Tyler posted something that he clearly intended Mara to read, addressed nominally to the group, about how some people in the family treated family like a transaction. Cassie replied with a sad emoji. Ron replied with a shrug emoji. Marcus Halper, bless him, said nothing. Mara took a screenshot of every message in the thread. On April 8th, 2 days before her stated deadline, she had received 0 responses to the email and 0 payments. She sent a brief, polite follow-up, noting the April 10th deadline and restating that she would need confirmation and payment to release the key. April 10th came and went, no responses, no payments, no calls from Tyler or Cassie. Patricia left a voicemail saying she hoped Mara would reconsider and that this wasn't the kind of family they were. Mara listened to the voicemail. Then she replied by text. The visit could not be confirmed without the agreed contributions, and accordingly, she would not be making the house available for the last weekend of April. She said she was sorry for any inconvenience and hoped they could reschedule. She then called Nadia Osi and told her the Cedar Falls weekend was back on. The following 3 days produced a sequence of events that Mara documented carefully and watched with the quiet attention of someone who has laid a table and is now simply waiting to see who sits down. Tyler called on the 12th and told Mara she was being selfish. Mara said she didn't think asking for a $200 contribution for a 3-night stay was selfish, and that she was happy to talk if he could engage with the actual figures. Tyler said figures weren't the point. Mara said then, what was the point? Tyler hung up. Cassie sent a long voice note on the 13th in which she cried, audibly, and said she had been so excited about the trip. And the girls had been so excited, and it was hard to understand why Mara was choosing to ruin it. Mara listened to all 3 minutes and 47 seconds. She transcribed the key sentences and saved the audio file to the Cedar Falls folder. Patricia texted on the 14th to say she had spoken to Tyler and Cassie, and they had decided as a family not to participate in the new system and that she hoped Mara would understand what she was giving up by choosing this path. Mara read the text. She thought about the phrase, decided as a family. She thought about the $4,200 she had never been repaid. She thought about the broken chair and the cracked window latch. She thought about 11 years of flexible and generous and available. She thought about Nadia, who was going through something real and painful and who deserved 2 undisturbed days on a porch above a lake. She wrote back to her mother, I understand your decision. I've made mine. The last weekend of April arrived gray and cool. The light low over the water, the trees on the far shore just beginning to come in. Mara and Nadia pulled up to 1148 Lakeview Road at 2 in the afternoon on a Friday and carried their bags inside. Mara had stocked the kitchen with groceries. She had a bottle of good wine and a bad movie picked out for Friday night. The dock was cold, but the view was clear, and the only sound was the water moving under it. They stayed until Sunday afternoon. They cooked every meal. They sat on the porch in the morning with coffee and read. They talked about Nadia's divorce, and about Mara's job, and about nothing in particular. No one asked Mara to clean up after them or manage their schedule or mediate between anyone. No one broke a chair. When they left on Sunday, Mara locked the front door, walked to the end of the dock, and stood there for a few minutes looking at the water. It was the same view she had sat with the day she closed on the house, the same private, earned quiet. What happened in the weeks that followed was not dramatic. Drama was not the point. The point was clarity, the kind that arrives when you stop absorbing consequences that belong to other people. Patricia called twice in May. Both times, she asked whether Mara had thought any more about the situation. Mara said she had, and that her position hadn't changed, but that she remained open to hosting family visits that were requested in advance and included a basic cost-sharing arrangement. Patricia said she found that very sad. Mara said she was sorry her mother felt that way. Tyler did not call in May or June. When Mara's father, Dennis, finally called, in late May, characteristically late to every conflict, he said, with genuine warmth and more fairness than the others, that he thought everyone had handled things badly and that he appreciated what Mara had built, and that maybe the family owed her an apology. Mara thanked him. She meant it. Marcus Halper, who had received the original email along with everyone else, and who had never commented publicly in the group thread, sent Mara a private message in early June. He said he had read her document and thought it was completely reasonable. He said his wife Janet agreed. He said they would love to visit the lake house sometime if Mara was ever open to it, and that they were happy to contribute. He mentioned a figure that was 3 times what Mara had asked. Mara wrote back and proposed a weekend in July. Cassie reached out in June as well, but not about the lake house. She reached out because she was behind on a credit card and wondered if Mara could help. The text was warm and slightly circular and very Cassie, and at the end it said, "You've always been so generous." Mara read it twice. She wrote back 3 sentences. She said she was glad Cassie reached out. She said she wasn't in a position to help financially right now. She said she hoped it worked out. She did not feel guilty. That was perhaps the thing that surprised her most. Not that she had done it, but how clean it felt afterward. Like removing a splinter you've had so long you'd stopped noticing the ache. The real consequence, the one that mattered, the one that the family had apparently not anticipated when they collectively dismissed her cost. Sharing document as hurtful and transactional was not a dramatic scene. It was not a confrontation with cameras or a public exposure or a legal reckoning. It was something quieter and in its own way more absolute. Mara stopped being available, not cruelly, not as punishment that she announced or weaponized, simply as a fact. She stopped being the person who absorbed the overflow. She stopped being the one Tyler assumed would cover a shortfall. She stopped being the property that Patricia could offer to guests without checking. She stopped being the unasked source. And in the absence of that function, the family had to reckon with something they had never had to reckon with before. The gap where Mara's accommodation had been. Tyler and Dana booked a rented cabin for their summer vacation. $480 per night, 2 nights, $960 total. Tyler mentioned this in the family group chat, apparently without any awareness of the irony. Mara noted the number quietly. It was more than 4 times what she had asked him to contribute. Cassie and Ron ended up not taking a vacation at all that summer, a fact Ron communicated to the group via sad emoji. Patricia and Dennis went to see Diane and Greg in Phoenix for Memorial Day, their first non-Callaway House vacation in several years. Patricia sent a photo of a cactus. Mara sent back a heart emoji. The thing about asking people to see what they have been given, for free, by someone who built it with their own hands, is that it is never really about the money, not entirely. It is about the acknowledgement. It is about the small, necessary act of looking at another person's effort and recognizing that it cost them something, that it did not arrive from the air, that it was not available simply because they needed it. Mara had not asked for gratitude. She had asked for $200. What she got was better than either. She got to understand with perfect clarity which members of her family were capable of seeing her as a full person rather than a resource. She got Marcus and Janet Halper on a Friday evening in July, sitting on the dock with a bottle of something good, watching the light fade off the water, and talking about things that weren't about what she could provide. She got Nadia's text later that summer, a single line, "That weekend saved me. Thank you for your house." She got her Sunday mornings. She got the dock. She got the view she had paid for. And in the family group chat, still active, still generating its regular content of birthday announcements and recipe photos, and Tyler's sporadic grievances, she remained a member. She replied when appropriate. She sent gifts at Christmas. She was present in all the ways that were real and none of the ways that were being taken. She had not burned anything down. She had not needed to. She had simply declined to keep rebuilding what she had not broken. The lake house sat on its hill above the water, quiet and lit. The chairs on the porch were all intact. The dock was clean. The key was on its hook. It was hers. It had always been hers. The only thing that changed was that now everyone knew it. Now that you've seen how it played out, was Mara justified? Did she go too far? Or not far enough? Give me your verdict in the comments. There is a category of revenge that does not produce wreckage. No one is arrested. No one is publicly humiliated. No one loses a job or a marriage or a home. The consequences are invisible to anyone who doesn't know to look for them. But to the person who executes it, to the person who spent years being quietly, politely consumed, those consequences land with the weight of years. Mara Calloway has been back to Cedar Falls 11 times since that April. She has hosted Marcus and Janet twice. She has hosted Nadia twice. She went alone in October and sat on the dock in the cold, as she had done the first weekend she owned it, and allowed herself the same thought she'd had then, that she had built something no one could take from her. This time, she was right. Dennis calls her on Sundays now. Their conversations are genuine in a way they hadn't been for years. Two people talking, rather than one person managing another's disappointment in her. He asked her, once, whether she regretted how it all went. She told him no. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Good, Tyler has not asked to use the lake house again, neither has Cassie." The cost-sharing document sits in Mara's Cedar Falls folder, still titled simply, Family Use Policy and Cost-Sharing Agreement. 3 pages, polite, precise, and devastating. Patricia still finds the whole affair sad and says so occasionally. And Mara receives this information with the equanimity of someone who has decided that one person's discomfort with a reasonable boundary is not an emergency she is required to respond to. The lake house was not sold, not subdivided, not turned into a commune. It was used joyfully, regularly, on Mara's terms, by the people who treated it with the care it deserved. And the people who had assumed it was theirs by proximity discovered, gradually and at their own expense, that things of value have owners, and that owners get to decide. That is the whole of it. If you've ever gotten even, or wished you had, tell me about it in the comments. I'm listening.